The child's scream wasn't human. It tore through the dense, rain-soaked pines of the Blackwood, a sound of pure animal terror that bypassed Hailey's ears and went straight to her marrow. She froze on the muddy trail, the grocery bag in her arms forgotten. The downpour had turned the forest behind her rental cabin into a dripping, gray-green labyrinth, and she'd only stepped out to get a moment's peace. A single breath that wasn't filled with the scent of baby, formula, and despair. Another scream, closer. It wasn't a toddler's cry. It was raw, ragged, the sound of something being hunted. Mommy. That word, that human word, launched her into motion. Hailey dropped the bag, apples thudding into the mud, and plunged off the trail, following the desperate sound. Branches clawed at her raincoat. Her boots sank into sucking earth. The rational part of her, the part that had learned to be cautious, screamed that this was a mistake. She was a single mother, alone, in a town where people's smiles didn't reach their eyes. But the mother in her, the part that had spent 3 years listening for every hitch in her daughter's summer's breath, couldn't stop. She burst into a small, rocky clearing, and there he was. A little boy no older than 5, huddled against a mossy boulder. He was drenched, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, his small body shaking violently. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart-wide, gold-flecked hazel, holding a fear far too ancient for his face. Behind him, the undergrowth rustled with a heavy, deliberate movement. A low, guttural growl vibrated the air, a sound that promised torn flesh and cracked bone. "Hey," Hailey said, her voice surprisingly steady. She kept her movements slow, putting herself between the boy and the rustling shadows. "It's okay, I'm here." The boy just stared, his breath coming in sharp, panicked hitches. The growl deepened. A massive, dark shape separated from the trees. A wolf, but like no wolf she'd ever seen in a documentary. It was the size of a bear, its fur a mix of storm cloud gray and black, its eyes the same unsettling gold hazel as the boy's. Saliva dripped from its exposed fangs, each one as long as her finger. Oh, God, this is how I die. The beast took a step forward, its muscles coiling. Hailey's mind went blank, then crystal clear. She had no weapon, nothing but her body. She spread her arms wider, making herself a bigger shield. "Run," she whispered to the boy, not daring to look away from the wolf's predatory gaze. "When I say go, you run back toward the trail. Don't look back." The wolf's lips peeled back further. It was going to spring. A roar shattered the tension. It was a human sound, but layered with the same primordial fury as the wolf's growl. A man erupted from the trees on the opposite side of the clearing. He was huge, easily 6.5 feet of corded muscle under a simple black t-shirt now soaked through. Rain slicked his dark, unruly hair. His face was all harsh, commanding angles, a blade of a nose, a jaw clenched tight enough to shatter stone. And his eyes, they locked onto the wolf with a fury that made the very air crackle. "Enough!" His voice wasn't loud. It was a whip-crack of absolute authority. The massive wolf flinched as if struck, a whimper escaping its throat. It took a stumbling step back, its head lowering. The man's gaze snapped to Hailey and the boy. For a fraction of a second, as his eyes met hers, the world tilted. A jolt, electric and terrifying, shot straight through her core. It was a pull, a recognition so deep and instinctual it stole her breath. His eyes, a stormy, impossible blue, widened infinitesimally. His nostrils flared, drawing in her scent through the rain. A tremor, visible even from across the clearing, ran through his powerful frame. The moment shattered as he looked at the boy. "Edward, to me, now!" The boy, Edward, scrambled up and darted across the clearing, hiding behind the man's legs. The man, Axel, some instinct supplied, never took his eyes off the wolf. "Back to the perimeter, Elias, you're compromised." His tone brooked no argument. The wolf dipped its head once, then melted back into the forest, silent as a ghost. Silence fell, broken only by the relentless drum of rain and Edward's quiet sniffles. Axel's attention returned to Hailey. The intensity of his focus was a physical weight. He scanned her from head to toe, a hunter assessing, but beneath the assessment was a heat that made her skin prickle. "You," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. "You stood between a shifter and its prey." His choice of word, shifter, not wolf, hung in the air, a mystery hook she was too rattled to fully process. All she could process was him, the sheer, overwhelming presence of him, the way her blood seemed to sing in response to his proximity. It was madness. "He's a child," Hailey said, finding her voice. It trembled. She hated that it trembled. "Not prey." Axel's jaw tightened. A flicker of something, respect, annoyance, crossed his face. "Your bravery is as foolish as it is intriguing." He took a step forward. Edward peeked out from behind him. "You're not from Blackwood." It wasn't a question. "I'm renting the old Miller cabin. For the summer, I'm Hailey." Revealing her name felt dangerous, but hiding it felt more so under that penetrating gaze. "Hailey," he repeated. Her name in his mouth was a caress and a claim. He took another step, closing the distance. The scent of him washed over her, rain, pine, and something wild, something fundamentally male that made her head swim. "I am Axel. This is my son, Edward." The wolf was hunting your son." The horror of it dawned on her. "The wolf is Pack," Axel corrected, his tone implying a world of meaning she didn't understand. Edward disobeyed. He crossed the boundary. The consequences are enforced. He said it like reciting a grim law. His eyes bored into hers. "You interfered in a Pack matter." A chill that had nothing to do with the rain slithered down her spine. Pack matter. The words were alien, threatening. "I saw a child in danger. Any decent person would have done the same." "There are no decent people here, Hailey," he said, his voice dropping. "There is only Pack, and there is everything else." He looked at her as if she were a fascinating, fragile bird that had flown into a cage of tigers. "You should go back to your cabin. Lock your doors. The woods are not safe after dark." Little did I know, that was the first real warning he'd give me. "What about him?" she asked, nodding to Edward, who was now staring at her with open, curious awe. "He is my responsibility." Axel's hand came down, large and possessive, on his son's shoulder. "As is the security you breached. We will speak of this again." It wasn't a promise. It was a verdict waiting to be delivered. The electric pull between them surged again, a live wire of tension. He felt it too. She saw it in the way his blue eyes darkened, in the subtle clench of his fist at his side. He was fighting it, fighting her. "Daddy," Edward whispered, his small voice cutting through the standoff. "She smells like sunshine and an home." Axel went utterly still. His gaze on Hailey intensified, becoming almost predatory. He inhaled deeply, and a shockwave of pure, unadulterated shock crossed his features before he brutally suppressed it. "Quiet, Edward." But the damage was done. The words hung there, a mystery hook she couldn't begin to unravel. Sunshine and home. "Go, Hailey," Axel commanded, but the edge had shifted. It was less a threat now, more a strained plea. "Now, before the full moon rises." He turned, shepherding Edward with him, and disappeared into the trees without a backward glance. One moment he was there, a dominating force of nature, and the next, the forest had swallowed him whole. Hailey stood there, soaked and shaking, the echo of his voice and the phantom sensation of that electric jolt coursing through her. The clearing was just a clearing again, but everything had changed. She stumbled back to the trail, retrieved her muddy groceries with numb hands, and practically ran to the cabin. Inside, the familiar scent of lemon cleaner and baby wipes was a weak comfort. Her daughter, Summer, played contentedly with blocks on the rug, her blonde curls bouncing. Hailey locked the door, then checked every window, her heart still hammering against her ribs. Axle, pack, shifter, the full moon. The words swirled in her head. She'd come to remote Blackwood to escape her past, to find a quiet place to heal and raise her daughter away from prying eyes and painful memories. She'd stumbled into a nightmare, or something else. That pull toward Axel, it wasn't normal. It was visceral, chemical, like her very DNA was reaching for his. What happened next changed everything. The rain stopped as night fell, leaving a dripping, eerie silence. Hailey put Summer to bed, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. She was pouring a glass of wine, her hands finally steadying when a sound froze her. A howl. It wasn't distant. It was close, right at the tree line behind the cabin. It was a long, mournful, and yet triumphant sound that raised the hairs on her arms. It was answered by another, and another, until a chorus filled the night. A symphony of wildness that spoke of a territory being proclaimed. And then a single, powerful howl rose above the rest. It was deeper, laden with authority and a raw, untamed power that she recognized. Axel. A soft whimper came from Summer's room. Hailey rushed in to find her daughter sitting up in bed, not crying, but listening. Her big, 3-year-old eyes were wide and clear in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Mommy," Summer whispered, pointing to the window. "The doggies are singing. The big, grumpy one is sad." Chills, colder than the rain, cascaded over Hailey. Summer couldn't have heard their conversation. She couldn't know, could she? "It's just wolves, honey. Go back to sleep." But as she tucked Summer in, her mind raced. Edward's strange eyes, the wolf's intelligence, Axel's instant, fierce recognition, Summer's uncanny words. It was all connected, a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit a human world. Exhaustion eventually pulled her into a fitful sleep on the couch. She dreamed of blue eyes in the dark and the sound of cracking bones. A thunderous pounding on her cabin door jerked her awake just before dawn. She bolted upright, disoriented. The howling had stopped. The world was pre-dawn gray and utterly silent. The pounding came again, violent enough to shake the door in its frame. "Open up," by order of the Blackwood pack. A man's voice, harsh and arrogant, not Axel's. Heart in her throat, Hailey crept to the window and peered through the curtain. 3 men stood on her porch. The one in front was handsome in a sharp, cruel way, with slicked-back dark hair and eyes the color of frozen whiskey. He wore an expensive leather jacket and a smirk that didn't touch his cold eyes. Behind him stood 2 hulking figures, who radiated the same dangerous energy as the wolf from the clearing. Shifters. "I know you're in there, human," the lead man called, his voice dripping with contempt. "My brother may be soft, but I am not. You have something that belongs to us. Open this door or we will take it from you." Brother. The pieces, sharp and deadly, began to click. Axel had warned her. This was the consequence. "I don't have anything of yours," Hailey called back, trying to keep the panic from her voice. The man's smirk widened. "Oh, but you do. The child, the little human child you brought into our territory. She carries the scent. She is a beacon. My name is Dominic. And I am here for what my weak-willed brother failed to secure." The world dropped out from under Hailey. Summer. They were here for Summer. Because of a scent, because of what Edward had said. Dominic's voice dropped, low and lethal, carrying perfectly through the wood. "You have 5 seconds to hand her over. The Alpha's bloodline must be pure. Your bastard child is an abomination he should have culled at birth." Alpha's bloodline. Your bastard child. The words hit her like physical blows. Axel. The Alpha. Summer's father. Memories she'd buried of a passionate whirlwind weekend 3 years ago with a devastatingly intense stranger who'd given only his first name. It couldn't be. It was impossible. But Dominic's next words confirmed her waking nightmare. 5, 4, 3. Did you really think you could hide the Alpha's daughter from his own pack forever, Hailey? Behind her, Summer's bedroom door creaked open, and her sleepy little girl padded out, rubbing her eyes. Mommy, who's the angry man? The door splintered with a sound like a gunshot. The door splintered. The sound was a gunshot in the small cabin, a final, violent period to Dominic's declaration. Axel's child, an abomination. The words echoed, but Hailey's body moved on pure instinct. She spun, snatching Summer from the floor, her daughter's small body a warm, trembling weight against her chest. Mommy! Summer's voice was a confused whimper, her eyes wide on the breaking wood. Hold on, baby, Hailey breathed already. The cabin had one back door, a flimsy thing leading to a scraggly patch of garden that bled into the true woods. Her heart was a frantic drum against Summer's. If only I had never come here. If only I had never stopped for that boy. The thoughts were useless. White noise beneath the roar of survival. She hit the back door, yanked it open, and plunged into the damp, gray dawn. The cold air slapped her face. Behind her, she heard the front door give way with a crash, followed by Dominic's snarl. Find her. Hailey ran, her boots slipping on wet pine needles. Summer clung in silence, her face buried in Hailey's neck. The trees closed around them, a labyrinth of dripping fir and skeletal birch. She had no plan, only the desperate need to put distance between her child and those men. Those things, with their cold, furious eyes. What happened next changed everything. A howl tore through the forest. It was not the distant, chilling chorus of the night before. This was close, singular, and brimming with a rage so profound it vibrated in Hailey's teeth. It was answered instantly by two others from the direction of the cabin, Dominic and his enforcers. The Alpha! One of the distant voices shouted, a thread of fear in it. Hailey stumbled, catching herself against a mossy boulder. Her lungs burned. The new howl had come from her left, deeper in the woods. Axel. It had to be. Was he coming to stop his brother or to claim what Dominic called his? She couldn't risk it. She changed direction, veering right, towards the sound of rushing water she remembered from her one cautious walk. The river. It might mask their scent. It was a thought born of primal folklore, but it was all she had. Mommy, the doggies are loud, Summer whispered, lifting her head. Her eyes weren't frightened, but alert, listening. They're not doggies, sweetheart, Hailey gasped, pushing through a thicket of brambles that clawed at her jeans. We have to be very quiet. A roar of engines erupted from the road near her cabin. Tires spat gravel. Then, the sounds of the forest were swallowed by a new, more immediate threat. The rapid, crashing pursuit of something moving through the undergrowth to her right. Too fast to be human. Hailey dove behind the massive, gnarled roots of a fallen cedar, pressing herself and Summer into the damp earth and rotten wood. She clamped a hand gently over Summer's mouth, meeting her daughter's wide, trusting eyes. Please, 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 she prayed to nothing in particular. The crashing stopped. Silence, heavy and watchful, descended. Hailey could hear her own blood pounding in her ears. Then, the soft, almost inaudible crunch of a careful footstep on leaves. A low, guttural voice spoke, barely 10 feet away. It was one of Dominic's enforcers. She can't have gone far. The pup will slow her down. The Alpha is coming, the second enforcer responded, his voice tense. Dominic said to retrieve the child before he intervenes. He thinks the Alpha is soft. The Alpha will tear out our throats if we touch his get without his say-so. You heard Dominic. The bloodline must be pure. It's not a child, it's a mistake. A human mistake. The words were a cold knife in Hailey's gut, a mistake. Summer squirmed, sensing her mother's distress. A tiny whimper escaped from behind Hailey's fingers. The sound was soft as a sigh, but in the predatory silence, it was a clarion call. Both shifters went utterly still. Hailey stopped breathing. "There!" the first one hissed. Footsteps began to move, circling, homing in on their root-cloistered hiding spot. Hailey's mind raced, blank. There was no escape. She curled her body around Summer, a final, futile shield. A new sound cut through the tension, the distinct, powerful thrum of a motorcycle engine closing fast on the nearby fire road. It skidded to a halt. Boots hit the ground. "Evan, Liam..." Axel's voice was a whip-crack of authority, reverberating through the trees. "You are outside your assigned patrol. You are hunting in my woods without my command. Explain yourselves." The footsteps behind the cedar root froze. "Alpha," one of the enforcers, Evan called back, his voice straining for respect. "Dominic ordered us. There's a human female with an unauthorized child. I know what my brother claims." Axel's voice was deceptively calm, a layer of ice over a volcano. "You answer to me, not to him. Stand down. Now." The silence that followed was thick with rebellion. Hailey dared to peek through a gap in the roots. She saw the two enforcers, large men in dark clothes, standing rigid. And she saw Axel. He stood at the edge of the fire road, his motorcycle a hulking silhouette behind him. He wore simple, dark clothes, but he seemed to fill the space, his presence a physical pressure. His eyes, even from this distance, glowed with a faint, amber light. They weren't fixed on his men. They were scanning the tree line, searching until they locked onto the fallen cedar. Onto her. He knew she was there. "The child is pack business, Alpha," the second enforcer, Liam, insisted, a dangerous thread of defiance in his tone. "Dominic, what my brother says is irrelevant," Axel roared, and the forest itself seemed to flinch. The power in his voice was not just sound, it was a force. The two enforcers took an involuntary step back. "You will return to the den. You will wait for me. If you take another step toward that cedar, I will consider it a challenge to my authority, and I will end you both." The threat hung in the air, absolute and deadly. With stiff, resentful jerks of their heads, the two enforcers turned and melted into the woods, heading back toward the pack territory. Axel didn't move. He waited, listening, until the sounds of their retreat faded. Then his shoulders dropped a fraction, the immense power reining itself in. He turned and walked slowly, deliberately, toward the fallen tree. Hailey shrank back, holding Summer tighter. He was more terrifying now than he had been in the clearing. Then he had been a startling stranger. Now he was an alpha, a werewolf, and according to his brother, the father of her child. The man whose one passionate, reckless weekend with her had created this nightmare. He stopped a few feet away. He didn't look at her directly, instead focusing on the moss at his feet, as if giving a wild animal a moment to adjust to his presence. "Hailey," he said, her name a rough caress in his deep voice. "You can come out, they're gone." "Stay away from us," she said, her voice trembling with fear and fury. He flinched, as if the words physically struck him. Finally, his gaze lifted and met hers through the tangle of roots. The amber glow had faded to a stormy, human gray, but the intensity was undiminished. He looked anguished. "I am not here to hurt you, or her." His eyes flicked to Summer, who was now staring at him with open, unblinking curiosity. "My brother Dominic acts out of turn. He will be dealt with." "He said you're her father," Hailey accused, the words tearing from her throat. Axel's jaw tightened. A muscle ticked there. He looked at Summer again, really looked, and Hailey saw the shockwave hit him. He was cataloging the details, the shade of her hair, the shape of her eyes, the tiny, pointed chin. His own features softened and echoed in a little girl's face. "He told you that," Axel stated, his voice hollow. "He said she's a bastard, an abomination that threatens your bloodline." Hailey's tears were hot now, born of rage. He was going to take her. What does that mean, take her? Axel closed his eyes for a long second. When he opened them, they were full of a grim, weary resolve. "It means what you fear it means. There are those in my pack, led by my brother, who believe hybrids weaken our kind. They see her existence as a stain, a danger." "She's a child," Hailey sobbed, the horror finally breaking through. "I know." The two words were a vow. He took a cautious step closer, then knelt, bringing himself to their level. He was still a large, intimidating figure, but the gesture was one of submission. "Hailey, listen to me. You are not safe. The cabin is compromised. Dominic will not stop. He sees this as his chance to undermine me, and he will use her to do it." "What do you want?" she whispered, exhausted. "I want to take you to a safe place. A place within my territory where my word is law, where Dominic cannot reach you without declaring outright war on his alpha." He held up a hand as she began to protest. "It is the only option. You cannot outrun them. You cannot hide from them. Your only protection is my direct protection, and for that, you must be on pack lands." The logic was inescapable, a trap closing around her. To run was to be hunted. To stay outside was to be exposed. To go with him was to walk into the wolf's den. Summer chose that moment to wriggle free of Hailey's restraining arm. She leaned forward, peering at Axel. Her earlier fear was gone, replaced by that strange, deep curiosity. "You're the loud doggy," Summer stated. A strange, pained expression crossed Axel's face. "In a way, yes. You sounded sad." Axel's breath caught. He looked from Summer to Hailey, his eyes pleading for understanding. "I was angry that someone was scaring you." "The other doggies were mean," Summer said, nodding sagely. "Yes, they were." Axel's voice was gravel. He slowly, so slowly, extended a hand toward her, not to touch, but as an offering. "I will not let the mean ones find you again. I promise." Summer, to Hailey's utter shock, reached out a tiny hand and placed it in Axel's massive palm. A connection snapped into place, silent and profound. Axel's eyes shimmered with that uncanny light again, and he inhaled sharply, as if catching a scent. Sunshine and home, his son had said. He looked utterly devastated. Hailey saw it, the recognition, the instant, bone-deep bond a parent has with their child. Any last, fragile doubt she'd clung to evaporated. This man was Summer's father. "Okay," Hailey heard herself say, the word a surrender. "Take us to your safe place." The journey was a blur of tense silence. Axel led them on foot deeper into the Blackwood, along paths invisible to Hailey's eyes. He carried Summer when the terrain grew too rough, the little girl resting her head on his shoulder as if she'd done it 100 times. The sight sent a pang through Hailey, a pang of jealousy, of loss, of terrifying possibility. After nearly an hour, they emerged into a secluded valley. Nestled against a sheer rock face was a long, low lodge built of massive logs and river stone. Smoke curled from a central chimney. It looked ancient and powerful. This was no cabin. This was the heart of the territory. "The Alpha's lodge," Axel said quietly. "No one enters without my permission." As they approached the wide porch, the front door opened. A woman stood there, older, with sharp eyes and a stern face, but her posture was one of deference. Beside her, peeking out with a guilty, anxious expression, was Edward. "Lena," Axel nodded to the woman. "These are my guests. They are under my protection. No one is to approach them. No one is that understood." "Yes, Alpha," Lena said, her eyes sweeping over Hailey and Summer with swift, assessing curiosity but no hostility. Edward darted forward. Dad, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, he stopped, staring at Summer in Axel's arms. His nose twitched. He looked at Hailey, then back at Summer. His young face paled with dawning comprehension. She's like me, but She is your sister, Edward, Axel said, his voice firm but not unkind. And you will protect her as such. Your disobedience caused this. You will help make it right. Edward's eyes went huge. He looked at Summer with a new, solemn wonder. A sister. Axel ushered them inside. The lodge was warm, dominated by a great room with a vaulted ceiling and a stone fireplace large enough to stand in. It was masculine, rugged, but clean. A place of power. He led them to a side bedroom, simple but comfortable. This room is secure. The windows are reinforced. Lena will bring you food and anything else you need. I must go. I have to address my pack. Dominic's actions cannot stand. He turned to leave, but Hailey found her voice. Axel! He paused at the door. Why didn't you know? She asked, the question that had been burning inside her. That weekend, I didn't know how to find you, but you're an alpha. How could you not know you had a child? He leaned his forehead against the doorframe, his back to her. The weight of his position seemed to press down on him. I felt a pull to you, a strong one. I thought it was just a mate pull, rare but not unheard of with humans. I was called away suddenly, a border dispute with a neighboring pack. It turned violent. By the time it was settled, months later, the trail was cold. I searched for you. I swear I did. But you were a ghost. And I never sensed a child. He looked over his shoulder, his gaze landing on Summer, who was now exploring the quilt on the bed with Edward watching her. She must have inherited her mother's talent for hiding, even from me. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Hailey sank onto the bed, her legs giving out. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a hollow, trembling exhaustion. Edward sat cross-legged on the floor, watching Summer. Your mom is really brave, Edward said quietly to Summer. She stood in front of a wolf for me. Summer nodded, as if this made perfect sense. Mommy's the best. Edward's expression grew troubled. My Uncle Dominic, he's really mad. He doesn't like humans. He says my dad is weak for not being harder on them. He looked at Hailey, his young eyes old with pack politics. He wanted to be alpha. He's always looking for a reason to challenge my dad. Now he has one. Hailey's blood ran cold. What kind of reason? A hybrid heir, Edward whispered. It's forbidden by the old laws. Some of the pack will side with Dominic. They'll say my dad broke the law and is unfit to lead. He hugged his knees. There might be a challenge. Before Hailey could process this new horror, the sound began. It started as a low rumble of many voices from somewhere deep in the lodge, then grew into a cacophony of shouts, snarls, and arguing. A pack in turmoil. Then one voice rose above all others, clear and cold and furious. Dominic, you bring this human and her mongrel into our sacred den. You spit on our traditions, brother. The law is clear. The abomination must be culled to purify the bloodline. Axel's answering roar shook the very foundations of the lodge. The law is what your alpha decrees. She is MY daughter, MY blood. Anyone who touches her answers to me. The shouting dissolved into chaos. A terrible, rending crash echoed, the sound of splintering wood and shattering glass. Edward shot to his feet, his face white with fear. They're fighting! From the main hall, a new sound erupted, not of human argument, but of bestial, tearing conflict. Snarls, the snap of jaws, the sickening thud of bodies colliding with walls. A full-scale brawl had broken out. Lena burst into the room, her stern composure cracked, a trickle of blood at her temple. We must move. Now, Dominic has forced the challenge. Hailey grabbed Summer. Where? The root cellar beneath the kitchen, it's stone. The only door is reinforced steel. Lena was already moving, beckoning them to follow. They fled the bedroom, hurrying down a back hallway toward the kitchen. The sounds of the battle were horrifyingly close. As they passed an archway that opened onto the great room, Hailey glanced in. The scene was one of pure, primal carnage. In the center of the ruined room, two massive wolves, one a dark, brutal gray, the other a powerful, tawny gold, were locked in a vicious, rolling fight. The gold wolf was Axel. The gray was Dominic. Around them, other wolves and men fought in a chaotic melee, a civil war erupting in the heart of the pack. Dominic broke away, his muzzle bloody. In a voice that was a guttural hybrid of man and beast, he screamed his triumph to the room. See his weakness. He fights for a humaness bastard. He is no longer fit to lead. He turned, his savage gray eyes, glowing with hatred, scanning the room. They found Hailey in the archway, frozen, clutching her daughter. A cruel intelligence flashed in them. He wasn't just fighting Axel for dominance. He was fighting to eliminate the evidence. With a world-shaking roar, Axel launched himself at his brother again, trying to drag his attention back. But Dominic feinted, dodging Axel's lunge with brutal grace. He wasn't aiming for Axel anymore. He turned his full, murderous focus down the hallway, toward Hailey and Summer. Lena screamed, "Run!" But it was too late. Dominic, the gray wolf, gathered his powerful haunches and sprang, not as a beast in a fair fight, but as an assassin. He cleared the distance of the great room in a single, terrifying bound, his jaws wide, aimed not at Hailey, but at the small, precious bundle in her arms. The world slowed. Hailey saw the rows of dagger teeth, the burning hatred in his eyes. She saw Axel, the golden wolf, twisting midair, a desperate, agonized snarl tearing from his throat as he realized he couldn't intercept. All she could do was turn her body, placing herself between those jaws and her daughter, a final, fragile human shield against the oncoming storm of fang and fury. The impact never came. A small, furious blur shot past her leg. Edward, in a form she had never seen, a gangly, copper-furred adolescent wolf with desperate, human eyes, launched himself at his uncle with a puppyish, fearless snarl. He was too small, too weak, but he was fast. He latched onto Dominic's foreleg, biting down with everything he had. Dominic howled in surprise and pain, his lethal trajectory thrown off. His snapping jaws missed Hailey by inches, closing on empty air. He shook his leg, sending Edward flying into a wall with a sickening thud. The distraction lasted only a second, but it was enough. Axel was upon him. The Alpha's golden form crashed into Dominic with the force of a landslide. The sound was brutal, final. This was no longer a challenge for leadership. This was an execution. Hailey didn't see the killing blow. She was already running, Lena pulling her toward the kitchen, Summer sobbing against her neck. She heard one last, wet, choking snarl from Dominic, and then a silence from the great room that was more terrible than all the noise that had preceded it. They stumbled into the kitchen. Lena was frantically working a heavy iron ring, pulling open a hatch in the floor that led to darkness. "Down, now!" Hailey descended the steep stone steps into the cold, earthy dark, Summer clutched to her chest. Lena followed, pulling the heavy steel hatch shut above them with a definitive, echoing clang that sealed them in tomb-like silence. In the absolute dark, panting, Hailey listened. She heard nothing from above, no more fighting, no more roaring. Only a single, long, haunting howl of anguish and victory that seeped through the stones, raising the hair on her arms. It was Axel's voice, in his wolf form, crying out to the forest. The challenge was over. Dominic was dead. But as the howl faded, a new sound reached her, down in the cold, dark earth. It was a soft, pained whimper close by, not Summer. Her eyes adjusted to the sliver of light from the hatch seam. Edward, back in his human form, was curled against the stone wall, clutching his side. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. He looked at her, his eyes glazed with pain. "I'm sorry," he whispered, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "I couldn't let him hurt my sister." Then his eyes fluttered shut, and he went terrifyingly still. The silence in the Alpha's lodge after Dominic's chilling vow was a physical thing, thick and cold. Hailey stood frozen, her arms locked around Summer, who had buried her face in her mother's neck. The only sound was the frantic drum of Hailey's own heart. He knows. He's coming for her. Axel moved first, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Elias!" His voice cracked through the grand room like a whip. The door to an adjoining room opened instantly, and Elias entered, his posture rigid. "Alpha! Secure the perimeter, triple the watch. Dominic is to be considered hostile. He is not to set foot within a mile of this lodge. Use whatever force is necessary short of a killing blow." Axel's commands were clipped, absolute. "And summon the elders, now." Elias' eyes flickered to Hailey and Summer, a flicker of something, regret, understanding before he nodded. "It will be done." He vanished back through the door. Axel turned to them. The authority that had sculpted his features moments before fractured, revealing a raw, desperate conflict beneath. "You are safe here. The lodge is the heart of our territory, warded by tradition and guarded by my most loyal. He cannot breach it." "He just did," Hailey whispered, her voice hoarse. "With words. He's not going to stop, is he?" "No," Axel admitted, the single word heavy with grim certainty. "He will not." Summer squirmed in Hailey's arms, lifting her head. Her eyes, wide and too knowing, went to Axel. "The angry wolf man is scary." Axel's jaw tightened. He took a step closer, then knelt, bringing himself to Summer's eye level. It was a gesture of profound submission from such a powerful man. "He is, but I am scarier, little one. I will not let him hurt you. You have my word, as your Alpha and as your—" He hesitated, the word father seeming to catch in his throat, a promise not yet fully earned. "As our what?" Hailey pressed, the fear sharpening her tone. Axel stood, his gaze lifting to meet hers. The full weight of it, the gold-flecked intensity, was almost too much to bear. "We need to talk. Alone." He glanced at Edward, who had been watching the exchange with solemn, worried eyes. "Son, take your sister to the kitchen. Mrs. Gibbons will find you both some honey cakes." Edward for once didn't argue. He approached Summer cautiously, holding out a hand. "Come on. The cakes are really good, and we have chocolate milk." Summer looked at Hailey, seeking permission. Hailey's every instinct screamed to keep her close, but the need for answers, for a plan, was a sharper blade. She forced a nod, setting Summer down. "Go with Edward. I'll be right here." She watched the two children walk hand in hand through an archway, Edward speaking in a low, reassuring tone. The sight of them together, dark head and sunny curls, sent a confusing pang through her, fear and a treacherous, deep-seated warmth. If only I had known who he was, what world he belonged to. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind them. They were alone in the vast living space, the fire popping in the hearth the only conversation. Axel paced to the massive stone fireplace, bracing an arm against the mantel, his back to her. "You have to understand our laws," he began, his voice a low vibration in the quiet room. "The Alpha's bloodline is everything. It is purity, strength, the stability of the entire pack. A hybrid child, a child born of a human and an Alpha, is an abomination," Hailey finished, Dominic's venomous word tasting like ash on her tongue. That's what he called her. Axel turned, his eyes blazing. "He calls her that. It is an old law, a brutal one, from a time when we were hunted and any dilution was seen as a fatal weakness." He pushed off the mantle, closing the distance between them. The air crackled, that same electric pull she'd felt 3 years ago, now magnified by terror and circumstance. I did not know. That weekend, I felt the connection to you, Hailey. It was like nothing I've ever experienced. A mate pull so strong it overrode every instinct but one. But when you left without a word, I thought it was just a powerful attraction. A mistake. I never sensed a pregnancy. Our kind usually can. I'm not your kind, she said, wrapping her arms around herself. I didn't know what you were. I still don't, not really. I just saw a man who made me feel alive for the first time in years, and then I saw a monster in the woods. He flinched. I am both. And the monster is my brother, who will use that old law to challenge my authority and take her. The pack is divided. Some see only tradition. Others will follow me. He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of sheer frustration. Dominic has wanted the alpha title since we were boys. He sees my connection to you, and now to Summer, as the ultimate vulnerability. He will use her to break me. The reality of it crashed down on Hailey. This wasn't just about a lost child anymore. It was a political coup with her daughter as the prize. What happens if he wins? What does Cull mean, Axel? The growl that escaped him was pure, undiluted menace. It wasn't directed at her, but it raised the hairs on her arms. He will not lay a finger on her. I will tear the world apart first. That's not an answer. It is the only answer that matters, he roared, the force of it shaking the crystals in a nearby sconce. He mastered himself instantly, but the wildness lingered in his eyes. The formal answer is that the pack elders would decide her fate. Exile or termination. To remove the impurity from the bloodline. A sob choked Hailey. She stumbled back, her legs hitting the edge of a leather sofa. My baby, she's just a little girl. Axel was before her in an instant, not touching her, but his presence was a wall of heat and fierce intention. Listen to me. She is my little girl too, and she is not just a girl. She is my daughter, which makes her, by blood and by right, a princess of the Blackwood pack. Do you understand? Her existence changes everything. It gives me a legitimate heir beyond my brother. It solidifies my line. For my allies, she is a blessing, not a curse. Hailey's mind reeled. Princess, heir, these were words from a fairy tale, a dark and dangerous one. She's 3. She likes blueberries and her stuffed owl. She doesn't want to be a princess. What she wants may not be a choice we have, Axel said, his voice softening marginally. The pull you feel between us, it's called the mate bond. It's why I couldn't forget you. It's why, when I saw you in the clearing, every cell in my body recognized you. And Summer, she is a product of that bond. She will have instincts, strengths. Did she ever do anything that surprised you? Anything unusual? The memories surfaced, unbidden. Summer, at 18 months, finding a lost kitten a mile from their old home, insisting it was crying. Her uncanny ability to always know when Hailey was sad. And the howls, she hadn't been afraid of the howls. She'd been listening. Yes, Hailey breathed, all the time. Axel nodded, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. She is part of this world, Hailey. You cannot run from it, not anymore. The only way to protect her is to stand in the heart of it with me. A sharp knock at the door broke the tense silence. Alpha, the elders are assembled in the council room. It was Elia's voice. Give us a moment, Axel called back. His eyes never left Hailey's face. I have to go and face them. I have to present my case, our case, for Summer's recognition and protection. You will stay here in these rooms. They are guarded. You are safe. What do I tell Summer? The question was a plea. Tell her the truth, he said. That she has a brother who likes honey cakes and a father who will fight the whole world for her. He reached out, his hand hovering just beside her cheek. The warmth of it radiated against her skin. I have to ask you for your trust. I know I have not earned it. Before she could answer, he turned and strode toward the door, the alpha once more. As he opened it, the low murmur of several voices filtered in from a hallway. Hailey caught a glimpse of stern, ancient faces before the door closed, sealing her in a gilded prison. The reaction to his departure was a sudden, overwhelming weakness. She sank onto the sofa, trembling. The consequence of every choice, that weekend, moving to Blackwood, saving Edward, was a tidal wave threatening to drown them. What happened next in that council room would change everything. Time lost meaning. Hailey found the children in a cozy, lamp-lit kitchen, sitting at a scarred wooden table with an elderly, kind-faced woman, Mrs. Gibbons, who was indeed serving honey cakes. Summer had chocolate milk on her upper lip. Edward was explaining with great seriousness the best way to eat the cake without getting crumbs everywhere. "Mama," Summer chirped, holding up a half-eaten cake. "It's yummy." For a moment, it was just a normal, sweet scene. Then Hailey saw the way Mrs. Gibbons's eyes, a gentle amber, lingered on Summer with a mix of awe and deep sadness. She was one of them, too. "Thank you for watching them," Hailey said, her voice still unsteady. "My pleasure, dear," the old woman said, her tone warm but layered with unspoken knowledge. "The little miss is a delight, so bright." She stood, gathering plates. "I'll be in the scullery if you need anything." When she was gone, Edward looked at Hailey. "Is my father going to make the bad men go away?" "He's trying, Edward." The boy nodded, a miniature version of Axel's solemnity. "He's the alpha, he's the strongest, but Uncle Dominic, he's sneaky strong." He slid off his chair and came to Hailey, surprising her by taking her hand. His small fingers were warm. "I'm glad I found you in the woods. Now I have a sister. The pack is supposed to protect family. That's the first law, even before the alpha's law. My father told me." His words were a small, fierce comfort. Hailey squeezed his hand. "Thank you, Edward." The evening deepened. Hailey put Summer to bed in a small, adjacent bedroom that felt both secure and surreal. Her daughter, exhausted by the day's terror and excitement, fell asleep almost instantly, clutching the unfamiliar but soft blankets. Hailey sat by the window, staring out into the dark forest surrounding the lodge. She could see shadows moving at the tree line, sentinels posted by Axel. She must have dozed off in the chair because the sound jolted her awake. A long, mournful howl that rose from the woods, not in aggression, but in proclamation. It was answered by another and another from different directions. A chorus of raw, wild sound. Summer didn't stir. Hailey crept to the main room. Axel was back. He stood by the cold fireplace, his silhouette etched in moonlight from a high window. He looked drained, but his posture was one of rigid triumph. "Well," she asked, her heart in her throat. "The council is deliberating," he said, not turning. "My declaration of fatherhood and my claim of the mate bond with you has forced them to acknowledge the situation. They cannot ignore the bloodline. But Dominic has rallied his faction. They demand a right of challenge." "A what?" Now he turned. His face was all harsh angles in the monochrome light. "To settle disputes of this magnitude, of law versus blood, there is an ancient right. A trial, not of combat but of essence. The child, Summer, must be presented to the sacred moonstone at the heart of the woods. Its light will reveal the truth of her nature. If it accepts her as Blackwood blood, her place is secured, and my authority is reaffirmed. If it rejects her," he trailed off. "If it rejects her, the elders side with Dominic," Hailey finished, cold seeping into her bones. "Yes. And you agree to this. You'd risk her on some magical rock. I do not have a choice. Refusal is an admission of weakness and doubt. It would hand Dominic everything." He finally moved toward her, his steps silent on the rug. "The stone is not malicious. It is a reflection of the pack's heart, of the truth. I have felt her spirit, Hailey. She is mine. She is ours. The stone will see that. When? The word was a whisper. Tomorrow night, at the full moon's zenith. The new question hung between them, terrifying and immense. Could a 3-year-old's essence satisfy an ancient werewolf stone? The night passed in a tense, sleepless blur. The next day was an eerie parody of normalcy within the lodge. Edward tried to engage Summer in quiet games. Mrs. Gibbons made comforting food no one could eat. Axel was in and out, preparing, planning, his presence a constant storm cloud of contained energy. Hailey could only watch and hold her daughter, memorizing the feel of her, the scent of her hair. As dusk fell, the atmosphere changed. The lodge, once a sanctuary, felt like a holding cell. The time had come. They gathered at the front entrance. Axel, dressed in simple dark clothes that emphasized his lethal grace. Elias and 2 other stern-faced shifters as escort. Hailey, holding a drowsy Summer wrapped in a blanket. Edward, insisting on coming, his small hand fisted in his father's pant leg. "Stay close to me," Axel instructed Hailey, his voice low. "No matter what you see or hear, the entire pack will be gathered at the clearing. Do not look at Dominic. Keep your eyes on me and Summer." They moved out into the cold evening air. The path was lit by torches held by silent shifters who lined the route, their eyes glowing in the flickering light. The sensation of being watched by hundreds of unseen eyes from the forest was paralyzing. Hailey heard the rustles, the soft pants, the low whines. The pack was all around them. The clearing was not the one from the first night. This was larger, older. Great standing stones formed a rough circle around a central dais, upon which sat a massive, rough-hewn crystal that pulsed with a faint, internal silver light, the moonstone. The air hummed with a low, subaudible energy that made Hailey's teeth ache. Hundreds of shifters stood at the edges of the stone circle, some in human form, others in the terrifying, shadowed forms of giant wolves. The silence was absolute, heavy with anticipation. At the far side of the dais stood Dominic. He was flanked by his 2 enforcers, his expression one of smug contempt. His eyes, glowing with a sickly yellow light, locked onto Summer. Axel led Hailey to the base of the dais. He took Summer from her arms. Hailey's grip tightened instinctively, a silent struggle, before she forced her fingers to unclench. He carried their daughter up the 3 stone steps and laid her gently on the smooth rock before the moonstone. Summer, awake now, looked around with wide, curious eyes, not frightened, but fascinated by the glowing crystal. "Begin the rite," an ancient, rasping voice commanded from the shadows. One of the elders. Axel placed a hand on Summer's small head, then stepped back, joining Hailey at the base. His hand found hers, gripping it tightly. It was the first time he had truly held it, and his touch was an anchor in the storm. Dominic stepped forward on the opposite side. "Let the stone see the truth. Let it see the human weakness that threatens to poison our heart." The moon rose above the trees, a perfect, bloated silver disk. As its light struck the moonstone, the crystal blazed to life, projecting a column of pure, cold light onto the small girl before it. Summer sat up, bathed in the luminescence. She giggled, reaching a hand out as if to catch the light. For a moment, nothing happened. The stone's light simply illuminated her. Then, a ripple went through the crystal. The light around Summer changed. It deepened, warmed from silver to a gentle, radiant gold. And within that gold, faint but unmistakable, the silhouette of a playful, leaping wolf pup shimmered around her small form. It was beautiful, a vision of innocent power. A collective, awed gasp went through the pack. Hailey saw Elias bow his head. She saw tears on Mrs. Gibbons's cheeks where she stood at the edge. Axel's grip on her hand was crushing. It accepts her, he breathed, a tremor of victorious emotion in his voice. It celebrates her. Dominic's face twisted in fury. No, it's a trick. The human woman has bewitched the stone. The stone cannot be bewitched, Dominic, the elder's voice intoned, sounding weary. The alpha's blood is true. The child is of the pack. She is recognized. The golden light began to fade. Summer, seemingly tired by the experience, yawned and slumped back onto the stone. The trial was over. They had won. Axel released Hailey's hand and moved to retrieve his daughter. Relief, sweet and dizzying, flooded Hailey's system. It was over. But Dominic was not finished. As Axel bent to pick up Summer, Dominic moved with viper speed. He wasn't aiming for Axel. He was aiming for the child. In a blur of motion, he shifted. Not fully to wolf, but into a monstrous, hybrid form, tall, clawed, and snarling, and lunged across the dais. "The law may accept her, brother," he roared, his voice distorted. "But I do not." Everything happened at once. Axel, caught off balance while lifting Summer, roared in fury. Hailey screamed. The pack erupted in snarls and shouts of protest. But Dominic was fast. His clawed hand swiped not to kill, but to grab. He seized Summer from the rock, snatching her from Axel's reaching arms. The blanket fell away. Summer let out a short, sharp cry of surprise. Dominic leaped from the dais, clutching the struggling child to his chest, and plunged into the wall of shifters on his side of the clearing. His enforcers, shifting as well, created a wedge of snapping jaws and slashing claws, holding the stunned pack at bay for a critical second. "No!" Axel's bellow shook the very stones. He shifted in midair, his clothes tearing, his body expanding into the form of a colossal, midnight black wolf. He landed on the dais with a thunderous impact and launched himself in pursuit. But the chaos was too great. Dominic, with his precious, screaming burden, vanished into the dark maze of the Blackwood. Axel skidded to a halt at the tree line, his great head swinging back toward Hailey. In his wolfen eyes, she saw a reflection of her own utter, soul-crushing devastation. The right had proven Summer's place, but proof meant nothing now. Dominic had her, and the deep, ancient woods filled with his loyalists swallowed them whole. The cliffhanger of the stolen child hung in the air, sharper than any claw. Hailey stood frozen in the clearing, the triumphant light of the moonstone dying behind her, as the howl that tore from Axel's throat was not one of victory, but of a father's primal, world-ending rage. The golden light of the moonstone faded, leaving only the ghost of Summer's terrified scream hanging in the clearing. One moment, she was bathed in sacred light, a princess acknowledged. The next, Dominic's monstrous, hybrid form, a nightmare of fur, muscle, and human malice, had snatched her and vanished into the black maw of the forest. Axel's answering roar of fury shook the very trees, a sound of pure, primal rage. What happened next would change everything. Hailey stood frozen, the world narrowing to the empty space where her daughter had just been. The cold night air rushed into her lungs, but it felt like breathing shards of glass. "Summer!" The name was a raw, torn thing ripped from her throat. She lunged forward, but strong arms, Mrs. Gibbons, held her back. "You cannot, child. Not into that dark," the old woman whispered, her voice thick with fear. In the clearing, chaos erupted. Axel, already mid-shift, exploded into his massive, midnight black wolf form. The transformation was a blur of cracking bone and expanding muscle, his clothes shredding. He didn't howl. He simply moved, a streak of darkness shooting into the tree line after his brother, a handful of loyal enforcers shifting and following. Elias, still in human form, spun to face the stunned pack, his voice a whip crack. "Secure the clearing, guard the alpha's mate." The word mate barely registered. Hailey fought against the restraining arms. "Let me go, he has my baby." And the alpha has her trail, Mrs. Gibbons said, her grip firm but kind. You running blind will not help. It will hinder. You must trust him now. Trust him, the man who was a wolf, the wolf who was her mate. The concept was madness, but the hollow, screaming void inside her had no other option. She sagged, her eyes fixed on the forest. The sounds of pursuit, snarls, crashing foliage, faded rapidly, swallowed by the immense, ancient silence of the Blackwood. Inside the Alpha's lodge, time became a torture device. Hailey paced the main room, her ears straining for any sound beyond the crackle of the hearth and the low, anxious murmurs of the few pack members present. Mrs. Gibbons brought tea she didn't drink. Every rustle of wind against the eaves was a footstep, every creak of timber was a whimper. "He will bring her back," Mrs. Gibbons said for the 10th time. "How can you know that?" Hailey's voice was brittle. "Dominic, he called her an abomination. He wants her dead." The Moonstone accepted her. The pack saw, the old woman insisted. But Dominic, he has always been a storm looking for a place to break. He covets what his brother holds. Hailey stopped pacing. "This is because of me, because Axel, because of what we did." "No, child," Mrs. Gibbons said, her eyes soft. "This is because of what you are. A touch of humanity to soften an alpha's heart is a threat to those who believe only in tooth and claw. Summer is the living proof that there is another way." The door burst open. Hailey's heart leapt, but it was Elia's, his face grim, clothes torn and smeared with dirt. He bowed his head slightly to Hailey. "We lost the trail at the Silver Creek. The water masks scent. Alpha Axel has split the hunters. He is on the dominant path. He commands you to remain here under guard." "Lost her," Hailey whispered, the room tilting. "You lost my daughter. Dominic knows these woods like his own soul. He planned this." Elia's jaw tightened. "The Alpha will not stop. He will burn the forest down to find her." If only I had known, Hailey thought, a dizzying wave of guilt and fear crashing over her. If only I had never come to Blackwood, never saved that little boy's. But then she saw Edward's face in her mind, his small hand in hers. And she saw Summer's joy at the golden light, the wolf pup shadow that was her own. This was her daughter's world, too. Running was no longer an option. Fighting was all she had left. "I'm not waiting here," Hailey stated, her voice suddenly, eerily calm. "Take me to where you lost the trail." Elia's blinked. "That is against the Alpha's direct order. It is not safe. My daughter is out there with a monster who wants to kill her. Nowhere is safe." She took a step toward him, a human woman radiating a defiance that made the seasoned enforcer pause. "You heard the stone. She is your Alpha's blood. Your princess, and I am her mother. Take me to the creek, or I will walk into those woods alone." Elias studied her, conflict in his eyes. He glanced at Mrs. Gibbons, who gave a slow, solemn nod. "The mother's pull is a force of nature itself, Elias. Perhaps one a hunter cannot predict." With a curt nod, Elias yielded. "Stay close, and do exactly as I say." The Blackwood at night was a different realm. The moon, once a ceremonial spotlight, was now a cold, distant coin behind scudding clouds. Every shadow breathed. Hailey followed Elias, her sneakers slipping on wet leaves, her human senses painfully dull compared to the tension in the shifter's body ahead of her. They moved in near silence for what felt like hours, until the sound of rushing water grew loud. Silver Creek was a wide, shallow ribbon of mercury cutting through the rocks. Elias stopped at the bank, kneeling. "Here, their scents end. Axel went north, following a false scrape on a pine. I think it's a trick." Hailey stood on the pebbled shore, desperation a bitter taste in her mouth. She closed her eyes, trying to quiet the panic. "Think, Hailey. You're her mother, you know her." She thought of Summer's habits, her fears. She hated loud, sudden noises. She loved hiding in small, cozy spaces. She always followed the path of dappled sunlight. Her eyes snapped open. He wouldn't take her deeper into the scary woods, not if she was crying, fighting him. He'd want to quiet her, to deal with it somewhere he felt in control. She turned, looking away from the dense forest, back toward the edge of the territory. Somewhere between the wild and the town, somewhere abandoned. Elias frowned. The old quarry, it's on pack land but disused, a border place. Take me there. As they changed direction, a new sound cut the night, not a howl, but a high, piercing cry of pain and fury that was unmistakably Axel's. It was followed by a cacophony of snarls and the sickening crunch of impact. The fight had been joined. He's engaged them, Elias hissed, his body coiling to shift. Run, follow this deer trail west. You'll see the quarry cliffs. I must go to my alpha. Before Hailey could respond, he was gone, a tawny wolf disappearing into the gloom. Alone, terror threatened to paralyze her. But the echo of that pained cry, Axel's cry, lit a new fire under her feet. She ran, branches whipping her face, her breath sobbing in her chest. The deer trail opened abruptly onto a man-made scar in the earth. The quarry. Steep, rocky cliffs descended to a flat basin littered with rusting machinery. And there, in the pool of moonlight at the basin's heart, was Dominic. He was in human form now, holding a squirming, sobbing Summer against his chest. One of his enforcers lay motionless nearby. The other was locked in a vicious battle with Axel's black wolf form. Axel was bleeding from a gash on his flank, his movements slightly slowed. He was trying to get to Dominic, but the enforcer was a wall of snapping fury, keeping him at bay. Enough, Dominic's voice echoed off the stone walls. He held his hand up, claws extended, poised over Summer's small throat. Brother, stand down or I cull the aberration now. Axel froze instantly. A low, continuous growl vibrated from his chest, but he took a step back. The enforcer facing him did the same, panting. Let her go, Dominic, Axel snarled, his voice a gravelly mix of human and beast. The right is done. She is recognized. This is treason. Treason, Dominic spat. I am saving our bloodline from your weakness. Mating with a human, siring this pet. You disgrace our father's legacy. He shook Summer, who whimpered. I will do what you lack the strength to do. I will purify our line. Hailey didn't think. She moved. Skirting the cliff edge, she scrambled down a steep, gravelly slope, her descent hidden by the noise of the confrontation. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had no weapon, no strength. All she had was a mother's rage. She emerged from behind a moss-covered crusher machine, 20 feet from Dominic. Axel's golden eyes flicked to her, widening in alarm. Dominic followed his gaze and laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. The human bitch comes to witness the consequences of her pollution. Mommy, Summer screamed, reaching out. Let her go, Dominic, Hailey said, her voice surprisingly steady. You don't want her, you want the alpha title. Take your challenge to Axel, wolf to wolf. Not this cowardice. Dominic's face contorted with fury. You dare speak of cowardice, you who hid his spawn for years. I didn't know, she shouted, the truth finally unleashed. I didn't know what he was, I just loved my daughter, and she is his whether you like it or not. The stone proved it. The pack saw it. You're not a purist, Dominic. You're just a loser throwing a tantrum. The insult hit its mark. With a roar of fury, Dominic shoved Summer away from him, sending her stumbling to the ground. Fine, I'll kill the mother first. Let the pup watch. He charged at Hailey, shifting as he ran. It was not the controlled transformation of Axel, but a violent, chaotic eruption of bone and fur into a brutish, slavering wolf. Hailey stood her ground, her eyes locked on Summer, who was scrambling to her feet. Run to your father, Summer, run! But Summer didn't run. She stood up, her little face streaked with tears and dirt, and she did something Hailey had never seen. She bared her tiny teeth, and a sound, not a cry but a nascent, defiant growl, rattled in her small chest. Her eyes, in the moonlight, flashed a brilliant, familiar gold. The sight of his daughter's first shift sign, triggered by mortal danger, broke something in Axel. The last vestige of his restraint shattered. As Dominic lunged for Hailey, a black fury intercepted him. Axel hit his brother with the force of a freight train. The two massive wolves became a whirlwind of teeth, claws, and horrific snarls. It was no longer a fight for dominance, but for survival. Hailey darted forward and swept Summer into her arms, retreating behind the rusting machinery. She held her daughter tight, shielding her eyes, but she couldn't look away from the battle. It was brutal and swift. Dominic was strong, fueled by hate, but Axel was fighting for his mate and his child. Every blow he took, he returned twofold. The final moment came when Axel locked his jaws around Dominic's throat, pinning him to the quarry floor. Dominic thrashed, his growls turning to choked gurgles. Axel shifted back to human form, kneeling naked and bloodied over his brother's wolf form, his hand now on his throat. "Yield!" Axel commanded, his voice the absolute, final law of the earth itself. The wolf beneath him went still. Then, with a shudder, it shifted back into Dominic, human, defeated, his neck in Axel's crushing grip. "Yield, brother," Axel repeated, his eyes glowing with alpha power. Dominic's gaze, full of venom, found Hailey and Summer. He spat blood. "The abomination lives. The pack is weakened. This is your legacy." Then his eyes rolled back. He yielded. Axel released him, standing tall. He looked at his remaining loyal enforcer. "Take him. Bind him in silver. He will face the Elder's judgment." As Dominic was dragged away, the quarry fell silent. The only sounds were the wind over the cliffs and Summer's quiet sniffles. Axel turned, his wounds already beginning to knit closed. He walked toward Hailey, his expression unreadable. Hailey met his gaze, holding Summer closer. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her trembling. He stopped before them. He did not reach for them. He simply looked, his eyes drinking in the sight of them safe together. Then he sank to one knee in the gravel, bringing himself to their level. His voice was rough with emotion. "I failed you. I failed you both. I let my brother's poison threaten what is mine." He looked at Summer, his gaze infinitely soft. "Can you ever forgive me?" Summer, after a moment's hesitation, wiggled out of Hailey's arms. She took a small step forward, her tiny hand reaching out to touch a streak of blood on his shoulder. "You hurt, Daddy." The word, spoken so simply, shattered the last of Hailey's defenses. A sob escaped her. Axel's breath hitched. He slowly, carefully wrapped his arms around his daughter, pulling her gently against his chest. He looked up at Hailey over Summer's head, his golden eyes holding hers. "I claim you both, before the moon and the woods and the stone. My mate, my child, my heart, if you will have me." Hailey looked at the man, the wolf, the alpha kneeling before her, cradling their daughter. She saw the raw love, the terrible burden of his power, the unwavering strength. She saw the father Summer deserved. And she realized with a jolt, the partner she had always, secretly, ached for since that weekend 3 years ago. The mate bond she felt wasn't a chain, it was a homecoming. She knelt in the gravel beside him, placing her hand over his where it held Summer. "We're not leaving," she whispered. He leaned his forehead against hers, a shudder of relief passing through him. "You are home." Epilogue 1 month later, the first snow dusted the Blackwood, painting the Alpha's lodge in soft white. Inside, the great room was warm, filled with the scent of pine and Mrs. Gibbons cooking. Hailey stood by the window, watching. In the clearing below, Axel, in human form, was teaching Edward how to track in the snow. Summer, bundled in a bright red snowsuit, toddled after them, trying to mimic her brother's serious steps, and falling over with a gleeful squeal into a powdery drift. Axel scooped her up, laughing, brushing snow from her nose before setting her back on her feet. The elders had sentenced Dominic to permanent exile, his name stripped from the pack rolls. His faction had dissolved, some following him into exile, others swearing new oaths to Axel. The pack, after the shock, had begun to unite around their alpha's new family. Summer's acceptance by the Moonstone was an unassailable truth. A presence warmed her back. Axel's arms slid around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "She's a natural," he murmured, watching Summer pounce on a snowflake. "She's a mess," Hailey corrected, leaning back into his solid warmth. The mate bond hummed between them, a constant, comforting awareness. It was no longer terrifying. It was theirs. "Our mess," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Edward has formally petitioned the elders to be named her official protector." He quoted 3 separate laws of lineage. Hailey smiled. "He's a good brother." "He is." Axel turned her gently to face him. His eyes, so often fierce, were soft. "And you, are you happy here with us, with me?" Hailey looked out the window again, at her daughter laughing in the snow, at the woods that were no longer a place of fear but of belonging. She thought of the quiet strength of the pack, of Mrs. Gibbons' kindness, of the way the moon now felt like a gentle, watchful eye, not a threat. She turned back to him, cupping his face in her hands. "I saved a lost boy in the woods," she said softly, "and he led me home. Yes, Axel, I am happy." Outside, under the pale winter sun, Summer threw a handful of snow at Edward, who gasped in mock outrage before sweeping her up for a revenge hug. Their laughter, bright and clear, echoed through the quiet pines, a new sound in the ancient Blackwood, the sound of a family whole at last.